You're listening to Fulfilling Career, Happy Life, the podcast for accomplished professionals who want to identify what's next in their career and make it happen without compromising what matters most. I'm your host, Randy Roberts, an executive and career life coach, and I'm glad you're here. If you want to feel more energized about your work again, this show is for you. So let's get into it. A topic that comes up fairly frequently in discussion with my clients is negotiating. And in particular, the fact that it can be really uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't call it negotiating. Clients may bring it up as having to establish deadlines or boundaries or challenge a situation to stand up for themselves. But in the end, it's really the same principles as negotiation. So if it were more comfortable for us to negotiate well, we could get more of what we need. We could deliver better on expectations, and we could free up a lot of that worry energy that just holds us back. So I am really excited about this conversation I'm having with Katy Chen Mazzara. Katy is a money mentor. She's a certified financial coach. She's also a life coach because she believes in a holistic approach to your finances. She's a graduate of the UC Berkeley Program in personal financial planning. So you can see she's got the qualifications. But the real reason I wanted to have her here today is that her approach is practical, it's supportive, and it's just doable. She really sets her clients up for success. I think you'll find the conversation really thought-provoking. She challenges some of the beliefs a lot of us have about negotiating, really brings a different spin on how to think about it, the mindset to bring to it, and how to prepare for these discussions. So I'm glad you're here to listen in. Hi, thanks for joining us. As you know, this season, we're doing a series of guest experts to address topics that come up frequently in discussion with my clients. And so the topic that we're going to talk about today is in around negotiating. And in particular, the fact that it can be really uncomfortable. Sometimes we don't call it negotiating. Clients might bring it up as having to establish deadlines or boundaries or challenge a situation and in some way stand up for themselves. But really, it's the same principles as negotiation. And it just occurs to me that if it were more comfortable for us to negotiate, we could get more of what we need. We could deliver better on expectations and free up some of that worry energy that just holds us back. So I am so excited today to welcome my guest, Katy Chen Mazzara. Katy is a money mentor. She's a certified financial coach. She's a life coach and really brings a holistic approach to your finances, bringing everything that she knows. She's a graduate of the UC Berkeley Program in personal financial planning, which is really rigorous. So you can see she's got the chops. And the real reason that I wanted to have her here is that her approach is so practical, so supportive, and just doable. And she really helps set her clients up for success. So I'm really excited about the conversation and so glad that you're joining me today, Katy. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. I'm so happy to be here. I'm really excited to be talking about negotiations because we both love to do it and love to help our clients to do it too.
Absolutely. It's so funny. It's like sport for me or something in a good way, but I really do love it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
So, Katy, let's start with why is negotiating so difficult for so many people?
I really believe that we are against anything that creates conflict, essentially, right? And we perceive negotiating as conflict, as a you win, I lose, or I win, you lose situation. And so then we're afraid of kind of putting ourselves out there, right? One, we don't want to get into conflict with anyone. And then two, we don't want to be on the losing end of a negotiation. So then that's why we think that negotiating is hard. It's, you know, it's something that we're dreading to do. And in fact, I actually don't see it that way.
It's really interesting what you're saying. It makes so much sense that if we believe, or maybe more, if we feel that it's conflict, like we bring that sort of approach and that energy to it. And if we're either looking to conquer the situation, or maybe worse, look to not be conquered, if you think about it that way, that brings a whole, the word that comes to me is weirdness to it, like ways that we get in our own way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we can really sabotage ourselves and think the worst, you know, when it comes to a negotiation. And in fact, like our mindset is really everything, right? And our energy is everything when it comes to those negotiation tactics. Yeah,
absolutely. So have you always been comfortable negotiating?
I have. And this is why. One, when I was a little kid, I found a book in my parents' garage. And I don't think they've ever read the book because it was in their garage, but it was called You Can Negotiate Anything. And I didn't read the book, but just seeing that title sparked something inside of me and was like, oh yeah, you can negotiate anything. I really believe that. And then the second thing is I noticed my mom doing it, right? Like my mom is really good. She's an immigrant. So I think there's a culture of negotiating, like with a lot of immigrants. However, she's really good at it. She's like, it doesn't faze her to actually ask for a price that she wants, no matter where she is. She could be at the Chanel boutique on Rodeo Drive, or she could be at the grocery store, right? And she will always ask if there's something like a little flaw in the fabric or something like that. She'll say, "Hey, can you give me like 10% off of this?" You know, and weirdly, a lot of times people say yes to her. Right? Like I've seen it over and over again. So I've actually come from this place of like, oh, it doesn't need to be like an uncomfortable thing. It's really just an ask, right? It's asking somebody for something, and it's doing it in a way that isn't like you're begging them or that you really need it, but it's like, oh, this would be nice if you could give it to me.
What you're saying is so interesting because, you know, the longer I'm a coach and do some inner work and studying and things like that, the more I tap into what you said, which is it's about mindset, or that's the foundation of it. And it's so clear to see the ways that we can get in our own way. Like what you're describing, you were kind of raised on negotiating and being comfortable with it. And your mom just approaches it as a question. She doesn't layer a bunch of stuff on it. It's a question.
Right, exactly. Yeah. In fact, it doesn't faze her if somebody says no either, right? Mm-hmm. She just kind of moves on with her day. And in fact, it actually endears people to her. Like at the Chanel boutique, she's been allowed to go into the back room where like the VIPs get to go. I've never even been back there, but she's told me about it. And anytime you walk in, everybody knows her. They're like, oh, Grace, it's Grace again, you know, and so they like clamor to her. So I actually think it's part of like really creating a conversation and you know, becoming friends with somebody in a way too.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I love the idea of, you know, it's a conversation and it doesn't have to have a huge amount of meaning behind it. Mm-hmm. And in some ways, like this, I'm glad you brought up this example. It's like easy to digest in a way. It's a transaction in a retail setting.
Yes.
A lot of times where the discussion of negotiation comes up, certainly with my clients, is they almost feel as though they're negotiating themselves because it's on their own behalf. And it seems like it gets more complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's Slightly different when it comes to you negotiating like your raise or promotion or even buying a new car or those kinds of things, right? Because there's probably a lot more of a personal stake to it. However, the approach is very, very similar to me, because again, it is a mindset and it is you shifting your energy, right? Like if your energy going into negotiation is, I'm not sure and I'm scared and they're probably going to say no, then most likely that's what the other person's going to read, right? That energy of you being hesitant, you thinking that they're going to say no. And then no matter what in their minds, even if they don't know why, they're going to say no. They're going to feel like you don't deserve it because that's the energy that's being put to onto the table. And so it's really important that you get clear about what it is that, why do you want this raise, this promotion, or this new car, and for this particular price, right? Like, and it can't just be because, oh, I need it, or I'm desperate for it, because that kind of thing turns people off.
When I think about negotiating, one of my favorite classes in business school was negotiation skills. And I still remember the professor and, the experience and all of that. And I did well in the class. And some of the feedback that I got was that I always look for the win-win.
Yes,
I do in any kind of a negotiation. So how can you bring that spirit? Like if you're in a situation where you're negotiating a job offer, say.
Yes.
Like, how can you bring that win-win thinking to that negotiation?
Yeah, I want you to think about it as like a collaboration, a co-creation, right? And the way you're doing this is like, let's brainstorm, right? Let's brainstorm some ways that we can actually get you what you want and get me what I want, essentially, right? Because if you're starting that in a negotiation, in a job interview setting, then they're already thinking of you as a collaborator. So when you start the job, you're starting off on a higher level than if you are like going for the jugular and really fighting with them to actually get a certain amount of money. Because if you're doing that, then you're setting yourself up a little bit like, I don't know. It's a slippery slope, right? Because you could be setting yourself in this position where they may think, oh, you better prove yourself because, you really fought hard for this amount of money and we didn't have it in our budget and we still gave it to you. So you better prove yourself. And then you're going to feel it. You're going to start to feel like, ooh, like that imposter syndrome thing and go, oh, I better prove myself because, I just really fought hard for this. Instead, if you are actually collaborating with your future employer to say what will work, right? What is the thing that you need more than anything, and how can I do this in a way that's uniquely me, and then help you to even save money, and help you to get things done even faster and more efficiently. And then there's a win-win situation. They're getting the project done. You're meeting their pain point essentially, right? And then they're giving you the money because they're willing to do that in order to actually have that problem solved for them.
Wow, I really like that collaboration and co-creation of that win-win, because not only does that hopefully get you where you need to be in a really healthy way, it starts off with that partnership. It shows confidence and that you know your worth, but it's in that positive way so that you don't create a situation where maybe you get the dollars you're looking for, but there's that weird energy on the back end again about, am I worth it? What are they thinking? Did I, push too hard? That's a great approach.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like it. It's funny. It brings to mind something that happened to me earlier in my career. I think I was like brand director level at that point. Mm-hmm. And general manager at the time at the pharma company I was at was trying to entice me to take a job, whatever. I think the offer that they made me it didn't feel fair to me from the standpoint that they wanted me to do a certain job without getting the title or whatever. So I went into this with a very open, this is, I see why this is good for you. I need to see why this is good for me. It was just a very open conversation. And I was shocked that the response I got was, I can't believe you're just not accepting this. Like, how can you ask for something more than what we're offering? And my response just instinctively was, with all due respect, I feel as though negotiation skills are an important part of the job that you're asking me to do. And if I'm going to be successful with that, why wouldn't I use that on my own behalf in a way that I think is fair? And it was really, it was a good instinctive moment for me. And I think it was important in terms of like setting my own boundaries. I didn't think about it that way at the time, but I think it was.
That's beautiful. And that's exactly another piece that I always teach around negotiations is really knowing your worth, right? When you actually understand what it is that you do and how you do it and what you bring to the table, then you can have answers like this, right? Where when they are confused, you have the answers that they're like, oh, wait a minute, we didn't think about it like that, right? And if we didn't think about it like that, then it's an easier way to start to break down whatever wall they may have about giving you the exact salary that you need.
Yeah, that's so great. It's interesting because it brings to mind for me how, like, you tend to think on the surface, if you don't negotiate well, or if you don't negotiate at all. And look, sometimes the first offer you get meets your hurdle, is what you need. So take it. That's not wrong. But if you don't negotiate, if you think there's an issue there of fairness, or you're not going to feel comfortable, it costs you more than just the money. It costs you that sense of self-worth, and maybe you don't bring your best to the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I would say that even if you think that the amount of money that they first offer you is great and maybe above what you thought you deserve, I would still say go for a little bit more.
Just on principle?
Just on principle. Just on principle, because one, I know that most of the time what they're offering you is still not the high end. Nobody really usually offers the high end. Very rarely have I seen somebody offer the high end, right? And then second of all, if you want to stay in this position for a little bit longer, you want to grow into it, right? You don't want to already start off with like, okay, this is the top of my range, and now where do I go, right? And now, okay, 2 months from now, I want to negotiate, but they're not going to want to negotiate with you 2 months after you start,
right.
So why not negotiate for what you want to be making even in a year from now? Right.
Yeah. I mean, that makes so much sense, because in some ways, and I don't mean like you should strong arm them, but in some ways, the appropriate time and the time when you have some leverage is when you're in that initial discussion.
Exactly.
So if some of our listeners are thinking about this and maybe considering, a job search and going into negotiations, how can someone get themselves ready to have the right conversation?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I always tell people is really understand why you want this, right? What is it that you want and why do you want it? And go really deeply. Don't just go on the surface of like, well, I need to pay my bills, right? Well, why do you need to pay your bills? And keep going and asking yourself that, right? And get to a place of like, that feels almost emotional to you. Right? There's an emotional reason for you to do the thing that you're doing. And I know that will translate very clearly. And I'll give you an example of that with one of my clients I was talking to. He had been overpaying his child support for years. And there's nothing wrong with paying your child support and overpaying your child support. However, it was sort of a pattern of his to always like be the most generous he possibly can, just so that nobody could come back to him and say he wasn't doing his part or whatever. So, and he wasn't, and it was also a situation where he wasn't like, it was almost like detrimental to kind of his finances, to be paying that much in child support. So I asked him to have a conversation with his ex, and he was like, oh, no. Every time we have these conversations, we end up in a big fight, and there's just, I just don't want to even bother, right? So, and then I asked him, well, why is it that you're even paying child support? And he said, well, I want to see my daughter. I want to really spend time with her, right? And I said, I bet you anything that your ex wants you to spend more time with your daughter too, right? And this is that place where you can start with the conversation. And so he did. The next time he went to drop off his daughter, he said to his ex, I really, really want to spend more time with my daughter. I'd love to be able to figure out, a little bit more time on the week, not just every other weekend or whatever, right? And then also just so some things in my salary have changed, so there may be less in the child support for the next payment. And then he calls me right after that conversation, and he said, you know what? This was so interesting because when I told her all of this, her response was, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And like for the very first time in their whole entire relationship, right, that she did not fight with him about it. And it's because when somebody really sees your intention and it's a really clear and almost like a pure intention, then it almost makes it like magical for you to get what you really want out of it, right? And it's like I'm a big Star Wars nerd, so I use this as an example all the time. It's like using the Force, right? When Obi-Wan Kenobi says to the stormtroopers, these are not the droids you're looking for. And the stormtroopers let the droids pass, right? R2-D2 and C-3PO and, Obi-Wan.
Yeah, that's like my favorite scene.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's how I feel about, when you actually shift your energy into a really pure intention, something very deep down and emotional for you, the other side receives that so clearly that almost that you don't almost have to say anything and they get it. They're on your wavelength. Right. And I've seen this over and over again with different people and different negotiations. And sometimes it's like the other side actually will say what you want them to say. I've seen that happen as well.
Well, it's really interesting what you're saying because it's such a great example because it's hard to imagine a more, at least potentially emotionally charged situation than providing for your children, wanting access to your children and all of that. And so if he's able to do it in that situation, you can imagine someone bringing that same approach to a negotiation at work. Still important, yes, but maybe less emotional. Really interesting. And, one of the things that I talk to my clients about a lot is all we can do is us. Like you can't control how someone else hears something or how someone else reacts, but we can set up a situation that hopefully we're not getting in the way of the desired reaction. And by him being clear on what his intent was, he allowed that to happen. It's one of the things that I have loved talking with you about in the past and reading the material that you put out and things is what you say about, getting clear on why you want it, why the money is important, because money's never just money. Money is choices or security or status or something. It's not, who cares about the paper you're holding in your, we're not holding paper anymore, but figuratively, it's something else.
Yes, absolutely. It's always something else. And in fact, if it was only paper or credit card or plastic, then we wouldn't be fighting about it, right? And it's the number one thing that most couples fight about, most families get divorced over. And the reason is it's because it has an emotional attachment to a lot of things, right? So then why not turn that around and make it an emotional piece for yourself to actually be able to get, the things that you actually want, right? The money and then the reason for the money.
Yeah. And that's a great, going back to what we were talking about with the win-win, that's really understanding sort of the positive in it. And that takes away the combative or the conflict in it. It's really about finding that win. That's really
right. 100%. Yes. Yeah.
What do you think, if there is something that you think, or a few things that you think people do badly in negotiating?
I think they give up too soon. I think that either they are accepting the first offer or they're accepting the next offer, right? And a lot of times, especially when you're going for a new job, it's not the first or second offer that usually gets you to the place that you need to get to, right? And I'll give a quick example of this is that one of my clients that I had worked on with negotiating, the first offer they said to her, they actually said, "We really love you. It was a big media tech company, and they're like, we really love you. We don't really want to negotiate, so we're giving you the top of the range." And so she came to me and was like, upset because the top of the range was really not even close to where she thought she was going to be. And I was like, that's okay, because to me, no is just the beginning of a conversation, right? Like, I do not believe that somebody saying no to you, like, then the door is shut and now you have to just accept whatever they give you. So I started to talk to her. First, we did the intention work. And once she did that and went back to them, they came back and said, well, again, this is the top of the range. But we'll give you a bonus. We'll give you a $5,000 sign-up bonus, right? And then she said to me, I think I'll take it. I just don't, I don't want to kind of go back and forth. And I think they're kind of annoyed at me.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what makes you think they're annoyed at you? And she showed me the emails. And there was nothing about those emails that made me think that they were annoyed at all. In fact, what I read from those emails was they still really, really like her. They wanted her. They were hoping that this would suffice. So then I realized, it's more of a worth piece, right? This is more of herself getting in that way. And so she could just go back and accept that $5,000 signing bonus. However, the next year, again, she's really behind on where she really wants to go, right? Where she really wants to be. So let's get her to that place now. And so I started to ask her some questions about her skill set. I don't really know the things that she does because I'm not in that tech world. However, it doesn't really matter, so I started to ask her what it is that she does. How does she do it? I looked at the job description, all these things. And then what I realized was she was actually at the wrong level, right? And I said, I think that you should go back in and ask to be placed at the higher level. Right? They have like levels, tier 1, 2, 3 or something. Maybe they put her in tier 2, and then so I said, ask for the higher level and here's why, right? And give them the reasons why you think that you should be at the higher level. So she went back and then, yes, they put her in the higher level. So then all of a sudden her range went from like just a little bit to all the way to to where she needed to go, right? So eventually what came out of that negotiation was about $20,000 more than when they first started, when they first told her, this is the max that we're going to be able to give you. So
that's great. And it sounds like if they were willing to work with her, they were obviously happy to get her, and she's going to start that new job able to just bring her best. because
Yes.
you're feeling so good about the situation. That's a great win.
Exactly. And if she had just stopped at that very first time, she would have just gotten the $5,000 sign-up bonus, and that's it, right? So that's why I say every single time, I think people stop way too soon, way before you're really, really ready and done with that negotiation.
Interesting. Okay. That's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
I think, when I've been talking to clients about negotiating packages in or out, sometimes it's negotiating a severance package even. It's, we talk about knowing, like being really clear to the point that you need to get to, and what are you willing to walk away from? And just make sure you've thought through all those eventualities for yourself. It's almost like you know what the answer is going to be before you go into the negotiation, or you know what your answer is going to be, rather.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's a really strong point. I really see that a lot, especially with like car negotiations or, any of those kinds of things, right? Like it's important that you know that there's a point where you are willing to say, nope, this is not for me, and say, yeah, and walk away from that, because if you're never willing to walk away and you never have if you're a bottomless, pit of understanding and compassion, then, you could be at the car dealership for, 20 hours.
Right.
Because they're masters at being able to sit there and wait it out with you, right? They're going to sit there. They're going to do all kinds of tricks, and especially they're going to go talk to their manager, quote and unquote. They'll ask you if you want coffee. They'll really drag things out, and you're going to get so sick and tired. And then you are going to be the one who caves, right? However, if you go into that negotiation already knowing what is your bottom line, and be willing to walk away from that and have those boundaries and be clear about it, then most likely it's going to be in your favor because they want to sell you a car.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I mean, you've shared so much wisdom here in terms of, from a employment negotiation standpoint, going into it with as though it's a collaboration, mm-hmm. really understanding what you want, getting clear about that. And just, I keep going back to the importance of mindset and knowing your worth in that situation, and, being honest with what you need and why, and how you can create that win-win situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Katy, for folks that are listening that may want more of you and your wisdom, how can they find you?
Yeah, well, I'm on all social media at Katy Chen Mazzara, KatyChenMazzara, and that's also my website, katychenmazzara.com. And yeah, you can find me in all of those places. I am also hosting a masterclass that's coming up soon, and we'll talk somewhat about negotiations in this masterclass. It's also a more comprehensive look at the 6 steps to financial freedom that I really believe in and have honed in on. And so it's a free masterclass. So if anybody wants to join me, I'll also give you that link to that class as well.
Great. That's great. 6, what did you say? 6 steps to financial freedom?
Yep. Yes.
Sounds pretty good to me. I'll make sure all of your links are included in the show notes.
Okay.
And I could probably even send something out to my list.
Awesome.
Because I think a lot of people could really benefit from that kind of information. So
awesome.
Katy, thanks for joining me today. It was such a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. And I loved this so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Fulfilling Career, Happy Life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe, follow, rate, and review. Do all the things to show your support for this podcast. It helps other professionals who want to feel more energized about their work again find us. And if you want to take this thinking further, please follow me on LinkedIn, where I share content on a regular basis. You can also get on my email list by downloading the Career Satisfaction Assessment or through my website. All these links are in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. I truly appreciate that you make the time for yourself to listen to the show. See you next week.